Today I'd like to share a recipe with you that seems to be disappearing over the years, but was an old favorite in Mexico. If you've ever gone to Mexico and seen the candied pumpkin, I'd like to recreate that for you today. I got this recipe book about 20 years ago from a nice lady I used to work with, and there was a recipe in there which I can't find anywhere else. I'd like to share with the viewers today. So today we are making candied pumpkin or pumpkin candy. The things you're going to need today to make the candied pumpkin are cal or pickling lime, sugar, a pumpkin obviously, a candy thermometer, and a good sharp knife. It's going to be done in two stages. First we're going to clean it and then soak it. Then we're going to cook it on the first day. The second day it's got to cool off and then we're going to cook it again. Now sometimes people have a hard time finding pickling lime because that seems to be a dying art. But you can go to a feed store, animal feed store, and get the same thing, lime. It's also called cal, and it's relatively cheap. So if you can't find it at the grocery store, you can go to the feed store and get it. First step, we're going to carve and clean the pumpkin, removing the outer rind, and then we're going to cut it in manageable pieces, about 2 inches square, and then we'll put it in a pot, soak it with the pickling lime. I'm going to read the recipe real quickly and recap what we've done so far and what we're about to do. The recipe calls for 1 medium jack-o'-lantern or yellow pumpkin, 6 to 8 pounds, 5 pounds of sugar, and 6 tablespoons of powdered lime. Now I went ahead and cut up the pumpkin. I didn't cut the whole pumpkin because it's an awful lot of candy, and I'm going to put a 4-pound bag of sugar in. But I have my pumpkin cut up to manageable pieces, some small, some medium, and I'm about to add the pickling lime with water, and from there it's supposed to soak. You put a heavy plate on it to weigh down the pumpkin, and you let it soak for 3 to 4 hours. 5, 6. Okay, one more for good measure. Okay. There. Okay, I've let the pumpkin and the lime sit for 4 hours, and it's time to drain it off and rinse it and prepare it for its first cook. When you take the pumpkin out, you'll notice it's got a leathery kind of texture to it. The lye kind of hardens the outside of it. So I guess that's what it's meant for, so for when we start cooking it. But for now, I'm just going to transfer it over here to a colander, and then we're going to rinse it at least 3 or 4 times before we prepare it for the boil. Okay, I'm going to continue to rinse this, and after a good 3 or 4 rinses, I'm going to go ahead and prep it for tomorrow. I'm going to cook it because it's getting kind of late. So what I'm going to do is put it in a cooler with some ice in it, and it'll keep just fine for the next day. Okay, now that we've let our pumpkin soak for a little while, actually for 4 hours according to the recipe, we're going to go ahead and move it outside because I like to cook outside on a flame. I have an electric stove, which is no good. So on this balmy November afternoon in South Texas, I'm going to proceed to the next step, which is add the water and sugar and then the pumpkin, and then we're going to let it cook for an hour. First step is to add approximately 8 cups of water 4 pounds of sugar. Recipe calls for 5, but I'm not making as much. Now our sugar is dissolved into a syrup in this pan, this pot, correction, and I'm going to add my pumpkin. Actually, hold that. Okay, the pumpkin has been boiling on low. Well, I brought it to a boil and I put it on low for an hour, stirring it frequently. As you would notice, the pumpkin is now turning opaque. We take it off the heat and we let it sit for overnight. The next day, we begin with our second and final boil. Today, I'm on my second and final boil. The recipe calls for to bring the pot to a boil and cook it for 45 minutes with a candy thermometer reaching 250 degrees. It says turn the heat down low, but in past experience showed me just get it up to 250 degrees and leave it there. And it should cook for 45 minutes. Also included, it says this should not be done on a rainy day. Although I have overcast, it's not quite threatening rain, so I'm going to do it anyway. And again, I'm doing it outside on my lobster boiler because I don't like my electric stove. Here you can see the pot has reached a good rolling boil. I've got the candy thermometer in there and I've attached it with a string so that it doesn't fall in because fishing it out isn't any fun. I'm still waiting for it to reach 250 degrees and it's not quite there. The pot's been boiling for approximately 35 minutes now. I've finally reached optimal temperature, 250 degrees, but I'm not sure. My candy thermometer just took a dump. And the moisture is burning off. As you can see, it's caramelizing and it's starting to change color. I'm actually going to turn it down a bit if I'm starting to worry about it. But at 45 minutes, we'll be taking it off the fire and putting it out on cookie tray. A lot of the moisture is burnt off of the sugar and it started to caramelize. As you can notice, some of these pieces have turned brown. That doesn't necessarily mean it's gone bad or it's not going to taste good, but you can easily burn sugar, so be careful of that. We immediately remove it from the heat and place it on the cookie tray. I have a buttered cookie tray, but being Teflon and nothing's really going to stick. I'm going to move you quickly over to the pot. As you can see on the pot, out in the corners, it started caramelizing, but it's still fairly yellow here. I really don't think it's ruined. I'm going to go ahead and try it. And all the moisture that was there previously is burnt off into a nice thick syrup. We're going to go ahead and place it all on the cookie trays and let it dry for 3 to 4 hours. I've laid out all the candied pumpkin, and it's on 2 different trays here. As you'll notice, some of the pieces have gotten dark, and when sugar burns very easily, it caramelizes, and it can give a real bitter taste. I've tasted some of it. The sugar, although it did brown up, it did not get that nasty flavor. So I went overboard on the heat a little bit, but it's still so-and-so. It looks good. This is all going to dry out after about 3 or 4 hours, and it'll cool, and then you can begin to eat it and enjoy. Share with your neighbors, share with your friends, and if you try it, I hope you like it. Thank you.